My humble pranams to Revered Director Samba, Revered Secretary Amba, respected Madam Principal Dr. R. Umarani, respected Controller of Examinations, Dr. P. Prakash, NSS Coordinator, Periyar University, our Honorable Resource Person, participants, good morning to one and all connected virtually. I wholeheartedly welcome our resource person, Dr. Y.Srinivasa Rao, sir, Associate Professor and Head, Department of History, Bharathidasan University, Trichy, for this webinar on understanding the significance of freedom and the freedom struggle on account of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. I welcome all the participants for this webinar. Thank you.
Now I invite Dr. J. Satya, NSS Program Officer, Unit 2, to introduce today's resource person.
I'm very happy to introduce and invite our today's resource person, Dr. Y.Srinivasa Rao, Associate Professor and Head, Department of History, Bharathidasan University. He is one of the notable persons and marked distinction in the field of history of science and technology in Tamil Nadu. He is a proud product of IIT Madras University. He is qualified NET and he has a teaching and research experience of more than 13 years. He has held many academic responsibilities as coordinator of BDU cycles, deputy warden, residential tutor at University, executive member, a Green and Clean Initiative of Bharathidasan, and he has also acted as a coordinator of John 8 courses, coordinator of Environmental Club, map coordinator, coordinator for external activities, and coordinator for examinations, and in charge of History Club, History Bharathidasan University. And his credits are as guided more than 6 M.Phil scholars and PhD scholars, and he is presently guiding 6 PhD scholars. And SAT has 13 research in journals and edited books. He has authored Subaltern Speaks in India, and he has organized around 10 conferences and workshops at both national and international level. He is active life member of various national bodies like Society for the History of Technology USA, Live Institute of Social Science Trade, Indian History Congress, and South Indian History Congress. He has acted as resource person in more than 30 events. He is the recipient of International Scholar Society of Technology, and he has also received the Best Library User. Above all, he is a man of kindness, very easy to talk, and easily approachable. When I approached him for this, and he was readily acceptance, even in the short span of duration. So honored to have such an eminent personality amongst us to deliver this speech on understanding the significance of freedom and peace. Once again, on behalf of everyone present, I welcome you, sir. Over to the resource, Dr. Y.Srinivasa Rao, sir.
Should I speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Madam Principal and Dr. Satya, I'm thankful to you for inviting me. Today I'm going to highlight the importance of freedom and how freedom struggle contributed to the freedom that we have today. Let me start by quoting Hegel. He says that we learn from history that we do not learn from history. So the human actions and endeavors and the human activities that created history for the human society to learn from it. Actually, according to Hegel, mostly we do not learn from history. So why he says so, how we can apply to the present situation in terms of the way we respect the freedom, the way we cultivate the freedom, where we promote the freedom. When you try to understand that, I believe Hegel is right. So freedom is mostly hard and it is not easily come. Though the nature, as a natural being, human as a natural being, certainly provided with the freedom. But what happens in a case when we talk about freedom, how freedom get actually restricted by various forces in the society. and what is the politics behind restricting the freedom or depriving the freedom to your human being who gets that ability of restricting the freedom, depriving the freedom to another. So how it takes place, why it takes place, what is the politics, what is the agenda, how people benefited from the benefits from the freedom, restriction of the freedom, deprivation of the freedom to another. So if freedom is let to flow freely in the society, what kind of wonders it will do, or the freedom need to be restricted for the greater good of the society? Is all freedom, is all kinds of freedom need to be allowed freely to flow in the society? So all these questions need to be asked, and we can, from examples can be drawn from the Indian freedom struggle. So naturally, freedom never remain as free for the reasons that human nature is that human societies, once they understand the power of controlling another, power certainly comes from power does not come from one individual. It comes from depriving the freedom to another. When you deprive the freedom to another, then a person acquires the power. So if I make you powerless, then I am powerful. So how the process of making someone powerless takes place? So you can easily understand why someone has to be made powerless. That means if you are trying to make someone powerless, that means you are depriving his or her freedom. So when the settled societies were taking place, where the society is collection of individuals, those individuals need to be administered, managed. So society is not a single individual. Society is a collection of individuals. So if that is the case, to manage the society, maintain the society, the formation of the society results in depriving the individual's freedom or the group's freedom and handing it over to one single person or a group whom we call a leader or leaders. So this is the process. So this process was happening in the settled societies, as well as the same process can be observed even in the present day societies, modern societies. The same principle applies. Formation of the kingdoms and the empires would not take place without the depriving the freedom to the conquered areas or conquered territories, without transforming the sovereign individual societies and communities or nations, whatever you call, into the subjects or subjugated societies. So that way, the empires, European empires, were formed in their process of expansion, formed colonies. These colonies are absolutely supposed to be freedomless, because the empires have the agenda. That agenda need to be fulfilled. Whether it is the pre-modern society, be it ancient, medieval, and or modern, the logic of depriving the freedom, or the purpose of depriving the freedom to an individual or to mass people is to acquire the power. So that power, many times, many people can say, it is for the purpose of society. To avoid the chaos in the society, every person cannot have an equal amount of freedom, equal degree of freedom. They need to be controlled. So therefore, there need to be a mechanism of controlling the freedom for avoiding the chaos in the society. So deprivation of the freedom is actually justified from the point of having peaceful societies, chaosless societies, societies that need to be well maintained and managed. So that is the justification given to the deprivation of freedom to the individual and groups at various times and various levels in various contexts. But however, not all the deprivation of the freedom is actually for the purpose of the greater good of the society or for the maintenance and management of the society. Certainly, there are politics behind it. There is there is a purpose of domination, cultural, racial, social. Of course, Europeans were dominating the Asia. So, if Europeans were trying to justify the deprivation of the freedom in Asia is for the purpose of the Asians, then we cannot agree to that idea of depriving the freedom for the common good or the greater good of Asian continent, can we? So therefore, we need to see, though many would agree that certainly that depriving the freedom to an extent degree is essential, otherwise society cannot be managed. But again, it need to be that argument or that idea need to be examined and further need to be examined and seen to what extent that positivity of the deprived freedom, when you take my freedom away for the purpose of maintaining the society, to what extent that freedom is properly used by the forces or the agencies which took away my freedom or asked me to sacrifice my freedom for management of the society. So I did sacrifice my freedom, but when I examine how my freedom, the amount of freedom, the degree of freedom I sacrificed, whether that is properly being used or not, each and every indigenous citizen and individual in each and every country has the ability and the right to ask questions on how the freedom that is sacrificed by the citizens of a country is being properly used. So that idea need to be put for argument. That is, the depriving the freedom, sacrificing the freedom, voluntarily giving away freedom for the purpose of the common good of the society is good, maybe. But however, to what extent that sacrificed freedom is being properly used for the common good of the society, need to be checked. So therefore, we need to see the difference or need to see where the freedom which is actually given by the individual to the collective agency called governments, corporations, empires, or UNO for that matter, United Nations Organization, and so on and so forth, how they are using their freedom. That we need to check. So therefore, most of the freedom, Asia, Africa, North America, South America, earned through hard struggles, by sacrifice of the lives of the people, by a long period of time of waiting, spending time in the jail, and people getting killed, people deprived of resources, material, and so forth, so on and so forth. But these hard-earned freedoms, how they are being used, and is there a difference when you look at the today's context throughout the world? In all African society as well as Indian, that is Asian society as well as North American society, how, I like to quote Hegel again, how the societies which decolonization is driving the colonial powers away from the country where who are ruling them. So the continents that I mentioned, Asia, Africa, and North and South America, all these continents were colonized by the Europeans, and almost all today, the last one was actually the Hong Kong in 1991. I think till though here and there some islands were still under the control of the colonial powers, but I think almost all entire the world is actually decolonized, especially the continents which were once occupied by the Europeans, so-called decolonized. But the question is, once you fought against the colonizer, foreigner, to what extent you are trying to put the freedom that is earned through a hard fight, a strong fight, a fight that need to be valued, to what extent that freedom is put into the proper use, or whether the governments, the governments of their own people, governments of Indian governments, which if it is Indian government, it is the government of people. If it is American government, is government of Americans. If it is South America, South Africa, if it is Brazil, today governments are their own governments. Yet, how their own governments are giving an impression that they are valuing the freedom, or whether the governments, their own governments, have acquired the qualities of colonialism, characters of colonialism, which they're repeating as like the colonial powers. They're also repeating the same thing, like depriving the freedom, if not entire country, as like the colonial powers, but some sections of the society will still fight for the freedom. So then that forced me to say that freedom struggles are never ended. We continuously fight for freedom. If not, we are not fighting for the freedom from the Britishers today, but India is fighting for the freedom from hunger. India is fighting for freedom from corruption. India is fighting freedom from the male domination over women. So like that, the freedom struggles are never ended. They continue to be waged in one or the other way. We call them in different names. It could be protest, it could be dharna, it could be national level movement, or it could be revolution. You can call it that way, or it could be a revolt, or anything, or protest, or march fast. These are all, all of them are freedom struggles. So only degree vary. It could be localized, it could be national, it could be regional. So it could be regional in the world level, it could be regional in the national level, it could be local. So everybody fights for the freedom, because that is the nature of the freedom. Because we are human society. Human society would not want a completely free human. If that is the case, power would not exist. So for the power to exist, the freedom need to be deprived. But at the same time, that power is actually exists out of a contract. What is social contract? Or a contract between individuals, that I sacrifice my freedom because for the betterment of the society. Therefore, I give you a right to rule me, and at the same time, you cannot use my sacrificed freedom against me. So it could be individual, or it could be a society, it could be a community. So how the India, if you come to Indian case, how the European Empire, British Empire, was trying to form itself into a powerful agency in India. Why it was doing it? What was the necessity? If you look at Indian freedom struggle, or the entry of the British into India, of course, the nature of the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. These three things goes together. The mercantilism, what is called in another name for capitalism, were actually expanding at that point. Was expanding at that point of time. It needs resources from various various places, because European continent cannot offer, or the individual nations cannot offer, the fast growing economies. So therefore, for them, there were two purposes. One is that they need to prove themselves they are superior race, European race. Another is that the techno-scientific development that took place in the society was actually naturally allowing them to expand into different areas. So the development that was taking place was not enough to accommodate itself within the nation, so they have to expand it. So that expansion also results in imperialism. expanding the boundaries, and at the same time that expansion of the boundaries beyond the continent. That's what we call them as overseas empires. So overseas empires actually colonizing the territories in Asia, Africa, and South America. In the process of colonization, first entered as trading agencies, later for the purpose of the trade, smooth trade or non-disturbing trade, you need to have political power. Now, we usually define colonialism as a process of politically subjugating for economic exploitation and cultural domination. So this is how we usually define colonialism: political subjugation for economic exploitation and cultural domination. So what is political subjugation? Political subjugation is when if there is two power centers existing, when the intention of the trade is actually uncontrolled trade, unrestricted trade, the trading company called East India Company was not happy that it is being controlled despite a European company. It is being controlled or asked to apply for licenses is not good. Therefore, it thought at certain point in time that it should have power of self administering itself, so that its business is not restricted or it need not have to apply for any licenses. So for that, two power centers should not exist. That means a local king cannot be asked the company to apply for the licenses. So a company need not have to apply for licenses. Company itself is an administrator. Company itself is a government. Therefore, there is no need for applying the license. So then the political freedom of the local political systems need to be eliminated. So that is what is political subjugation. So politically, you are not equal to me, so therefore I will give you freedom or I don't give you freedom. So therefore, depriving the political freedom of the local kingdoms was a first step for the colonization of India, without which the colonial business or the company's business would not take place, or it will not go as it wanted or as it wished. So therefore, political subjugation
Satya, voice for
Sir, meeting that.
Inamma?
Sir? Sir, we couldn't hear you, sir. Your screen is freezed, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
ஆனா சார் உள்ள இருக்காரு சத்யா.
கேக்குறேன்.
ஓகே.
over India, and that is essential for economic exploitation. So how do you understand the economic exploitation? Economic exploitation also results in depriving the freedom of what I should produce and what I should not produce. So which means the economic production or economic activity in the country is actually being redesigned according to the interests of the British. So what you produce is being determined by according to Ramesh Chandra Dutt. Ramesh Chandra Dutt is one of the educated intellectuals from Bengal, and he is from of course a landlord background and went to England, studied, and he written books on the economic history of India. Dadabhai Nauroji and Ramesh Chandra Dutt have highlighted how the which later called as economic nationalism. They laid down the theories. They laid down the theories of economic idea called economic nationalism. So by that means by pointing how Indians were deprived of their freedom to produce what they wanted to produce is actually being determined by the merchants of Manchester. So Ramesh Chandra Dutt opposing such kind of policy, economic policy, mercantile policy, he criticizes the British government, saying that you cannot determine the policy, economic policy of India by submitting yourself to the merchants of Manchester. Okay, so therefore you need to redesign the economic activities based on what India needs. So that way, the economic freedom or the freedom of production is also deprived, because what is England? Colonies were actually created for the purpose of serving the mother country. Mother country in India's case was England. Mother country in Indonesia's case was Netherlands. Mother country in Indochina, today's Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, 3 countries. In their case was France. The mother country in Malaysia's case was England. So like that, the colonies were actually serving the needs of the mother countries or empires. So therefore, what you produce was being determined by what they need. English Industrial Revolution was primarily was in textiles. Initially, was in textiles. So the textiles needs cotton, and textiles also needed indigo, the color giving material. So these two were actually imposed on India. Most of the production that we are producing for the mother country was cotton. So why so much of cotton was needed? In fact, we need to take this to make another point, that from the cultural anyway, the other point that I wanted to talk about in the definition of the colonialism is the cultural domination. So that is political subjugation for economic exploitation and cultural domination. So how culturally we are being dominated, that is why that cultural domination is important for colonialism. Is, for example, let us see the link between Industrial Revolution, cotton, and dressing culture of India. So Rudyard Kipling's, if there are English students present here, they would know, is an English literary person, is a poet. So he wrote a poem called White Man's Burden. So White Man's Burden, he says that the Europeans have took the burden of civilizing the non-civilizing societies, or barbaric societies, or uncivilized societies. So that way, I mean, he's trying to justify with this poem, he's trying to justify the colonialism in India, justifying the colonialism in India, saying that the Britishers are here not to exploit, not to destroy, not to underdevelop the Indians, but to develop the Indians. So this is the general justification given for the colonialism. So now let us see, he was writing a poem called White Man's Burden, which is actually under the broader strategy called civilizing mission. So a civilizing mission is that the argument is that the Europeans were civilizing the uncivilized societies through their hard work. That was the idea. So then, and let us see the close link between culture of dress and industrial revolution. So culture of dress in India is actually by the time. So whether we try to see it or not, or whether see the problems or not, or whether we try to see probably that is good what has happened because we are well dressed today. Otherwise we were half naked and this that we were talking about. So whether you wanted to argue that or that is up to you. But however, how it happened, that's what I'm trying to point out. That the increasing dress, the increasing consumption or increasing usage of the cotton in India was actually to serve the industrial revolution in the textiles. So the India has to be transferred into a cotton or the finished goods buying market. And at the same time, India need to be turned into a cotton producing center. So colonialism uses the colony in two ways. One is it turns the colony into a raw material production center, and at the same time it also turns the colony into a material finished goods buying center. So India was doing that. So it was buying a lot of cotton, and to make the Indians buy the cotton, more clothes, not cotton, more clothes, the British government or the intellectual colonialism, the people who involved in generating ideas to make the empire do well in India, they were actually doing like people like Rudyard Kipling in trying to point out how Indian dress culture is not equal to that of the Europeans, while the European dress culture is decent, civilized, Indian dress culture is not so. So the idea behind trying to highlight the differences between European dress culture and Indian dress culture was to sell more clothes. It has nothing to do with uncivilized and civilized, or indecent and decent. Okay, so it was much more to do with selling more clothes, finished goods, because the industrial revolution in England producing more clothes, and they need to be sold somewhere. So therefore, throughout the world, wherever the Britain has colonies, and trying to use this idea called highlighting the cultural differences between the cultures, that is British culture or European culture and the local culture. If it is South Africa, South African culture. If it is India, Indian culture. If it is Malaysia, Malaysian culture. So like that, highlighting the differences between the cultures in order to sell more clothes, so that it provides fuel to the industrial revolution. Otherwise, cotton in the textile industries will not go on forever. So, and they cannot make the money they made. So and they cannot become the rich as they are today. Of course, you can understand most of the richness of the Europeans, European countries that we see today. We admire them. We see their cities and go there and see their cities. We wonder where this wealth came from. And it's very obvious that the wealth was drawn. From Asia, Africa, and South America, North America. That is where the wealth that you see, the fantastic towns and the cities that you can see, the cultural richness, the economic prosperity that they went through last 2 centuries was actually wealth that is drawn from the 3 continents. So therefore, when we come back to this connection between the cloth and the industrial revolution, and trying to turn the colonies into materials, finished goods selling markets, is closely related with the idea of colonialism. So therefore, here the culture of dressing, if you look at that is also depriving your choice of dress. The positivity, negativity of civilizing mission are trying to change the dress culture, what we call modern westernization, modernization. So positivity, negativity of that can be debated. But however, I was just trying to make a point that how industrial revolution and clothes selling in India has a close connection, and how that is it's a colonial strategy. So, coming back to the economic deprivation, or the depriving the freedom of production. So, India was producing cotton and indigo for the England Industrial Revolution. That is the fact. So, if that is the fact, certainly the British government was redesigning Indian economy, and that redesigning Indian economy under the pressure of the merchants of Manchester, and under the pressure of the global economy. What was needed for the global economy, not the local economy. What was needed for India was not being produced. What was needed for the international market, that was being produced. So that's the idea. That is how you have to link with how the economic freedom of India was deprived, was redesigned in order to serve the needs of the Britain. So against this, you can see in fact the deprivation of economic freedom, freedom of production, there is a realization by the Indian intellectuals, educated intellectuals, by 1900. It was began, the deprivation of economic freedom or the freedom of production was began in 1770s, and it continued, of course, up to 1900, where for the first time in 1905 we see the Swadeshi movement. Though it was in 1904, the partition of Bengal, in the name of Bengal being the biggest presidency to administer, the British government makes a plan to divide the Bengal into East and West. Then the Indians saw that as a divide and rule, separating the Muslims and Hindus. By logic, the today's Bangladesh, that was the East Bengal at that point in time, was dominantly inhabited by the Muslims, and the West Bengal, of course, Bengalis. So British took it as an opportunity to divide them, because Bengalis, West Bengal or Calcutta, was the first area which went through the British rule for some time. That is from 1757 to 1911. The capital of British Empire in India, or the British colonialism in India, colonial government in India, was Calcutta. So the Bengalis were exposed to the borrowing of the European ideas, and they began to understand what is happening in India. They are trying to understand the nature of British colonialism, British government. So that obviously they're more in number in criticizing the government, Bengalis. So the British government thought we should not let them be united. So therefore we need to divide them. So against this, the partition of Bengal in 1904, there was a movement called Swadeshi movement in 1905. So though it was against the partition of the Bengal, Swadeshi movement, but the word Swadeshi refers to an idea called all that is Indian need to be revived. So that means from 1757 to 1905, India was under the influence of Videshi, that is foreign. So it never made efforts to talk or think about something Swadeshi. It does not mean that something called Swadeshi was not existing. Of course, we have the systems of production before the British came throughout the nation, throughout the country. But they went through changes. They, in the process of bringing new systems of production, Swadeshi systems of production went through changes, displaced or dismissed or dismantled or destroyed. So therefore, something called Swadeshi need to be re-engineered. That's what the idea of Swadeshi movement. So re-established, revived, restarted. So this is what the idea behind Swadeshi movement. So therefore, the economic freedom that is deprived by the colonial government was actually being fought for with the Swadeshi movement. So everything that was Indian, though it was logically it was not possible. Say for example, VOC steam navigation company, if you say it is Swadeshi, in terms of individual who is starting it, in terms of finance who is doing it, or maybe it is Swadeshi, but technology was not Swadeshi. So therefore, but however, that idea was not taken seriously. You need to be an Indian owner, there need to be Indian people, they need to be Indian workers, they need to be Indian teachers, they need to be Indian schools, they need to be Indian colleges, they need to be Indian teachers, they need to be Indian money in financing, they need to be Indian, so administration, organization. So it logically need to be Indian, completely need not have to be Indian. So therefore, that with that idea, the economic freedom is began to be war for or fight for economic freedom began to be it was began in 1905 with the Swadeshi movement. Everything we need to do something for rebuilding the Swadeshi. So they pointed out how textile industry was destroyed by the Indian textile industry, or the Indian handloom industry was destroyed by the mill-made clothes or the textile industry. So therefore, we need to restart the handloom industry one or the other way. We need to start schools, we need to start colleges, we need to start industries like the steam navigation, of course. We need to start banks. Most of the banks which we see today was started in 1905, responding to the Swadeshi movement call. So the economic freedom that was deprived, or the freedom of production that was deprived from the 1757 was realized, the importance of that was realized, and the Indians were trying to gain foothold from 1905. Similarly, the formation of the idea of India, or the formation of idea of nation, or the realization of the importance of political freedom was began, of course, with the 1857, but that took an organizational shape in 1885 with the formation of the Congress, and that has provided opportunity for all the people from all sections of the society to deliberate, discuss and debate and take the Indian people's view to the British government, how what they think about the government, where are the areas they oppose, and what they don't like about the British government, and so forth. They were began to reach the government through Congress as an organization. But Congress, unfortunately, has been an organization of the elite, which was changed into a mass national organization by M.K. Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, in 1920. As soon as he became the leader of the freedom struggle, he was asked to take up the non-cooperation movement in 1920, and there he felt the need of mass movements, or the freedom struggles cannot be led by few people. That is the difference between the Indian Indian freedom struggle and the rest of the freedom struggles in Asia. Some of them are revolutionary revolts, but Indian freedom struggle is only constitutionally correct, morally correct, ethically correct. And it took some time, of course, from 1857 to 1947. It took some time, but it is hailed as one of the peaceful and morally, ethically correct and constitutionally waged war against the colonial government. So Gandhi was trying to transform a party. Today it is Congress, but earlier it was Indian National Congress, though it is also called as Indian National Congress. It was actually representing the entire country at that point in time. So there are problems, of course. Muslims and untouchables were not part of it, but yet in a sense Congress took the responsibility of voicing the nation to the British. So such an organization cannot be led, or membership cannot be limited to elite people, rich people, powerful people. So the constitution of the Congress was changed by Gandhi in 1920. He has rewritten the constitution to allow each and every individual wanted to wish to join the national movement. So whoever is joining the Congress would be part of national movement. So just for membership fee you can take, and then you can, so expanding the movement into mass movement. Everybody need to feel the necessity of being free from the foreign rule. So therefore, some people take the responsibility, rest do not feel responsible. So he thought everybody need to feel responsible for their freedom. So he has expanded the subscription, or allowed the subscription to each and every person who is having foreigner, or who is having the wish to be free. So like that, in 1920, Congress, from 1885 to 1920, it remained as an elite organization. Then it transformed into a mass movement. So that has changed the very the power, and it acquired automatically. The freedom struggle acquired a huge amount of power, where the British getting started worried. Because earlier it can deal with one single organization, leaders of organization. Today it has to deal with the entire mass organization, which has branches everywhere. In every province they have branches. So these branches were having their own opinion according to the local problems, and so on and so forth. So therefore, and this mass movement was based on a constitutional response, a constitutional protest. That means constitutionally allowed protest. That means it does not involve in violence. It march fast, it conduct dharnas. So it submits petitions, it sit-ins and sit-ups. So all these things, court arrest. So all these things were actually putting pressure on the British government. So these methods are Gandhi, which are actually called Gandhian strategies. So Gandhian strategies seems to have worked well to put pressure on the British government. So therefore, the transition of the Congress from being organization of the elite into the mass, like everybody's organization, a national organization. So typically that was getting the very idea of national organization. So like everybody feels that they have to fight for the freedom. So everybody was joining, men, women, children, workers, peasants, farmers. So everybody were joining in that. So that transition was the greatest first step towards the political freedom. Oh, yet we need to recognize the internal contradictions which are actually still bothering India. Is that in fact 1919 what has happened was the Turkey, which was the religious capital of the Islamic world, where the Khalifa is equal to that of Pope. So his seat was dismantled by the British because in the First World War, Turkey joined with the Central Powers. So Turkey lost, and Turkey as a nation was dismantled and shared among the Allied powers. So thus led to, which means automatically the seat of Khalifa was also disturbed. So therefore, the Muslims throughout the world were trying to re-establish the Khalifa or save the Khalifa. So in India, there was Khilafat movement. And Gandhi came into the scene by 1920. In 1919, there was Khilafat movement. And in 1919, there was Rowlatt Satyagraha against Rowlatt Acts. And Gandhi believed the internal contradictions, that is, the internal differences between two major communities in this country, need to be sorted out and they need to be brought together. That is, Muslim League that was formed in 1906, and the Congress. They need to be brought in, though Congress never claimed and never worked for Hindus alone, but Muslim League was trying to make that point. But however, there was a domination of rich Hindus in Congress. There is no denying about it. So therefore, Muslim League was trying to go and make that. But so Gandhi thought, yes, it is time for us to come together. So he used the Khilafat issue to bring the Muslim League and Congress together, and he brought them together and clubbed them together and announced the non-cooperation movement in 1920, in which he demanded dominion status and resolving the issue of Punjab, where General Dyer killed Indians, and is also demanded at the same time the Khilafat issue need to be addressed, so Khalifa seats should not be disturbed, and so on and so forth. Like that, what was happening was that in 1920 was trying to he was trying to bring a sort of a cementing the relationship between the Muslim League and the Congress. That of course continued further, but it again went in different ways. And at the same time, because as a nation, when we are talking about the freedom, we need to talk about not only talk about the ways and means and methods we use it to fight against the colonial government, and at the same time, we need to see how and what kind of means and methods we generated in course of time to correct ourselves. So similarly, in 1923, for the first time, the Congress ever recognized the problem of untouchability, and that has later in 1934 resulted in Gandhi taking the steps to remove untouchability. So that is actually recognizing the internal contradiction. Back in 1829, when the two cultures came together into one territory, that is Western and the East Indian culture. For the first time, the Indians were realizing that there is a serious problem with the issues of women, and that need to be addressed. Otherwise, we cannot be we cannot be called as a decent civilization. So, therefore, the socio-religious reforms in 1820 was a self-correction mechanism. Because Britishers are calling now such culture we do not have. So therefore, if we have the problems, what I call civilizational inadequacies. Civilizational inadequacies means if you call yourself as a civilized society, all the characters that need to be called as civilized society need to be absent. So therefore, pushing a woman into the fire as a culture cannot be accepted, utterly inhuman. So therefore, it need to be stopped. So like that, the course correction or cultural reformation, socio-cultural, socio-religious reformations in 1830 was also kind of reforming the society when two cultures came together and tried to highlight the differences, try to see the positivity, negativity of the both, and whatever negativity is there being recognized and corrected. So that is also something good, but however, it is not went on to the level it is expected to do. So similarly, in 1920s, these two problems, like one is the problem of the unity between the two organizations which would have to fight for the freedom, and the other is like internal contradictions, like not recognizing the problem of untouchability as a national issue was also came to forefront in 1923 for the first time, which was recognized as a problem of the nation. So from then on, the efforts were made to address the issue of untouchability. So like that, the freedom movement, with so many contradictions over a long period of time from 1857 to 1947, it went to different kind of methods and struggles and means to fight for the freedom. It used the constitutional mechanisms and, for example, boycotting the legislative assemblies started by the British government in India from 1860s onwards. Is not continuously boycotted. They have used whenever it is necessary. They opposed whenever it is necessary. So they simultaneously fought for constitutional developments.